Here are some reminders to help you get the most out of your DIVES CD lessons. First, work the problems with me. Work every single problem that I work and take notes on everything that I write on the board. One thing I encourage you to do is on the first practice problem, work that one with me, but then for the second and subsequent ones, pause the CD, try to work the problem on your own, then fast forward to the answer. If you got it right, great, you can move on to the next one. If you got it wrong, rewind the CD, look at how to solve the problem, and figure out how to do it correctly. Next, anytime you need to, pause and rewind the CD until you understand that particular concept. The ability to pause and rewind so easily is what makes DIVES CD lessons so much better than a live classroom lecture, so make sure and take advantage of that technology. Next, remember the purpose of math is to teach you to think and to solve problems, to effectively and efficiently think and solve problems. In the lower math levels, there's lots of mental math. In the upper levels especially, this is the most important purpose of math, is to teach you to think and to solve problems. Next, do all of the problems in the problem sets. It depends on the course that you're doing, but typically you'll do 3 to 5 problem sets a week, so that means 3 to 5 CD lessons plus a test. Next, work the homework problems and your test problems too. Work those vertically. Split your paper in two and work them vertically. And of course, make sure you show your work on your problems too. As you work them vertically, write each step down and write each subsequent step underneath the previous one. And this will help you sometimes to recognize patterns a little bit easier and help you solve the problem better. Also, use a calculator sparingly, only for geometry problems and some word problems. Don't use it for Math 7-6 or below that for any of that. Algebra half and up, use it sparingly. And lastly, have a good attitude. Every day you do school, you have a choice to make. It is your personal choice to have a good attitude, work hard, do your best, or to be lazy, complain, whine, and have a bad attitude. So choose right now to have a good attitude. Dive in, take advantage of this CD lesson, and do your best to learn the math that you're going to learn today. Lesson 30 has two parts. The first part is about algebraic phrases, and the second part is on decimal parts of a number. Now, we talked about this just briefly in Lesson 22. In this lesson, in Part A of it, we're going to get into it a little bit more detail. And if you remember in Lesson 22, what you were doing there is you were taking some English sentences and you were turning those into algebraic sentences. That's a really important part of algebra, is being able to take an English sentence and the words and the numbers that are in there and converting that into an algebraic expression or equation. If you're doing the Saxon textbook, in that lesson there's a whole list of English sentences that you can convert, or actually they already have them converted into algebraic phrases, and you can look at those and see if you can memorize those and maybe cover up the algebraic phrase on the right and work each of those out until you get them correct. I'm going to put a list of English sentences on the board here, and I want you to convert each one of those into an algebraic phrase or expression. Well, what I want you to do on these algebraic phrases is just go ahead and pause the CD and figure out if you can do and create the correct algebraic phrase for each expression. So for practice problem A, the sum of a number and 5, well, you see a number, so that's an unknown or a variable, and so you would just give it a descriptive name like n for number. You didn't have to use n, you could have used x or anything, but I'm going to use n since that stands for number. And we're talking about a sum here, so that means addition. The sum of a number and 5 would just be written as n plus 5. You could put that in parentheses if you wanted to too, but it's not that important. And then the next one is the sum of the opposite of a number and 11. Well, if a number is n, the opposite of that number would be minus n. And again, we're doing sum, so we'd say minus n plus 11. Then C, the product of 3 and the sum of a number and 2. So that word product, that tells us that we're doing a multiplication here. But there's also the word sum in there, so there's an addition part as well. Now the best thing to do on these problems is just to read them left to right and then write the algebraic phrase down left to right. So the product of 3, so that means 3, and then I'll have times the sum of a number and 2. So I put n plus 2 inside those parentheses there. And that gives me a product because I have 3 times that sum of n plus 2. D, the sum of negative 11 and 3 times a number. Okay, well we have negative 11 and 3 times a number. So there's a sum here. So we're adding 3 times a number. So 3n. Negative 11 plus 3n. And then in E, the quotient of the opposite of a number and a number plus 4. So we have a quotient here. So that tells me about division. I need to do division here. And the quotient of the opposite of a number, well, the opposite of a number is negative n. If that number is n, its opposite is negative n. And the n, there's the word and, so that tells me that should be where my fraction bar goes. And then a number plus 4 will be in the denominator, n plus 4. So that's the algebraic expression that represents the quotient of the opposite of a number and a number plus 4. You can't get enough practice doing these algebraic phrases, so I would do the practice problems that are in the book too, and I would also do the ones at the beginning of Lesson 30 in the Saxon textbook. Part B of this lesson is about decimal parts of a number, and this is just like fractional parts of a number. Remember, in fractional parts of a number, we always use this formula, f times of equals is, and that helps us think about how to set the problem up and how to solve it. And they always give us 2 of the 3 parts of that formula, and then we just have to solve for that third unknown part. Now decimal parts of a number, we'll use a real similar formula because a fraction is like a decimal, right? And so instead of an f there, we'll just put a d. D times of is equal to is. And that formula, that will help us think about how to solve these problems and how to set them up. Look at practice problem F. 0.15 of what number is 52.5? So we have a decimal part there. 0.15 of what number is 52.5? We need to figure out the what number part of the total. 0.15 of the total. So we'll have 0.15 times of, or times what number, is equal to 52.5. So that what number part is the missing part, and so we just divide both sides by 0.15. And so what number, then, we can do that on a calculator or just do the multiplication out and the division. In this case, we'd be doing division, and that result is equal to 350. So 0.15 of 350 is equal to 52.5. Let's do another one. What decimal part of 64 is 12? Well, we see it's a decimal part of a number problem. Let's go ahead and write down our formula. D times of equals is. And we just look at the words here, and it says what decimal part. That means we're trying to figure out the decimal, D. What decimal part of 64? So we'd say D times 64 is, that means equals 12. So now we have our problem here. Let's go ahead and divide both sides by 64, and that will solve for D. And we want to write that answer in decimal form. So 12 divided by 64, that's equal to 0.1875. So that's the decimal part of 64. 0.1875 of 64, that equals 12. Now a problem like that, we could have just as easily written it as a fraction, but they asked for a decimal, so that's why we wrote it as 0.1875. So make sure you answer these questions correctly. Recognize that the problem is a decimal part of a number problem, then write your formula down and figure out where to substitute the values in that they have given you and what is the unknown. Okay, well that's all for lesson 30.